Good morning. So today, myself and my teammates, Jennifer and Kritan, we've decided to focus on talent outsourcing as our topic, with the subheading concentrating more on managing the challenges of outsourcing and offshoring. So first of all, we need to talk about what is talent outsourcing. We've gotten to realize that talent outsourcing is a business practice of hiring external individuals or organizations to handle specific roles or functions that would otherwise be performed by individual employees. Instead of recruiting, training, and managing staff directly, a company contacts another firm or agency to provide a skilled professional background on their behalf. This approach is often used to reduce costs, to assess specialized expertise, to increase flexibility, and to focus on core business operations. We actually have key points why these companies tend to go with recruitment agencies. A purpose, number one, as we all know, is to reduce costs, to assess specialized skills, to increase efficiency, and to focus on core business activities. Here, for example, hiring a third-party IT firm to manage software development, which is common in developed countries right now. Outsourcing customer support to a call center. How about contracting freelance designers, marketers, or engineers? And this has brought us to types of outsourcing, because there are different types of talent outsourcing. We have the offshore outsourcing, we have the nearshore outsourcing, and we have the onshore outsourcing. I know you might be confused not knowing the difference between them. We know the offshore outsourcing is hiring talent from another country. We know nearshore outsourcing is hiring from a nearby country. And the onshore outsourcing, which is really common, whereby you hire within your country, when a company hires within its country. You know, we've come to realize that talent outsourcing is when a company leverages external professionals or agencies to handle certain business functions, often to save costs or access specialized expertise. We've seen there are different forms of outsourcing platforms. First of all, we know IT, which is really common to us. We can see a retail company outsourcing its software development to a specialized tech firm in India. We know that tech is big in India, so most companies tend to outsource individuals from India. And why? Why do they do that? There should always be a why. It tends to reduce costs. Number one, which is really, really important. Secondly, we can think about customer support. For example, we can see an e-commerce company hires a call center in a country like Philippines to handle customer inquiry 24/7, which is actually now a norm in our global system. Why do they do that? They do that to provide the round-clock support at a lower operational cost. We look at other aspects like accounting, payroll, marketing and design, human resources, which we are mainly common with. We can see a small-sized company partners with a recruiting agency to hire software engineers. Why do they do that? There is always a reason why this is done. They do that because to just speed up hiring and leverage the agency candidates database. We still have manufacturing. We have healthcare administration. We're seeing hospitals outsourcing medical billing and transcription to a third-party provider. Of course, the healthcare sector do still have its own reasons. Why? Because they tend to focus doctors on patients. They want doctors to focus more on patients than paperwork. That's why they do stuff like that. So right now we're talking about managing the challenges of outsourcing and offshoring. So my group members, Jennifer and Krita, with painstaking search, sleepless nights, made sure we went deep down to get more information on challenges of outsourcing and offshoring in a firm. Back in 2011, Boeing promised the world an aircraft, a revolutionary aircraft built through global outsourcing to over 50 suppliers across loads of countries in the world. What was the result? 3 years of delay. And they made a loss of over $50 billion, which was a manufacturing nightmare, which almost destroyed the company's reputation. Now I'm not talking about a story about outsourcing failure. No, we're not talking about that. This is about a story of what happens when we chase efficiency without understanding it completely. Today, we have over 300,000 jobs that are sourced from the United States alone every year. 300,000 jobs. Companies like Apple, Nike, Tesla, Microsoft, top companies, you can name it. They've been able to build a global supply chain which promise is irresistible. Of course it's irresistible. These are big companies. Reduce costs by 30 to 70%. They have access to specialized talent and operate 24/7 across time zone. But here's what's the business case. Here's what they actually don't tell you. For every dollar saved in labor costs, companies often spend 50 to 80 cents managing these hidden challenges. These challenges, we have communication background, we have quality inconsistencies, we have cultural misalignment, people with different cultural backgrounds. And we should know these are not just minor inconveniences. They are strategic risks that can sink an entire project completely. So the question is not even whether to outsource. No, we're not talking about that. The question is, how do we outsource intelligently? That's the question. We have several challenges, right? Of course, the number one challenge, it's money. It's common because that's the usual reason why companies outsource in the first place. Money. Imagine you're a chief financial officer of a firm and your team presents a proposal and they say, we can move our customer service to a country like Philippines and save, let's say, $5 million annually. What would you think? Of course, you might want to sign that off immediately, right? Then 18 months later, you tend to spend, let's say, $2 million on transaction costs, $800,000 on additional management layers, and customer satisfaction has dropped by 15%. What would you do? What happens? But you should know you're forgetting about hidden costs. Hidden costs like transition costs, management overhead. And in that management overhead, not to forget, you need people to manage the offshore team. You need people to manage the offshore team. We also have currency fluctuations. Think about it. That cheap rate in India rupees is not going to be so cheap when dollar weakens, right? It's not. Then now we'll go back to the solutions. What are the solutions? Think about it. The smartest companies use total cost of ownership models, not just labor average. Not just labor. They tend to calculate the true costs over 3 to 5 years, including all hidden expenses. You know, we have another challenge which causes massive frustration, which is time zone and communication, which, trust me, most firms, they go through this problem. Picture, for instance, your team, they are in, for instance, London, and they email the development team in, let's say, India 12 hours later. Then they get a response asking for clarification. Another 12 hours for your reply. Another 12 hours for theirs. Just think about it. It's a calamity already. This is a problem that should just take 2 hours to solve. It will actually tend to take 3 days or more to solve. But it's not just time difference. That's just minimal. What about culture? What about culture? Let's say, for instance, an American manager says there's a deadline, but let's try. They mean it's tight. They mean the deadline is tight, actually. But the Indian developer nods his head and says, yes, we will try. Yes, we will try. What they might mean is that it's impossible. Them nodding their head like this, they might mean it's impossible. But I don't want to say no directly. They don't say no directly because they will not want to upset anybody. We now tend to see different cultures have different communication styles around conflicts or feedback, which is normal. What's the solution? What do leading companies do now? Number one, leading companies, they tend to carry out something which we call overlap hours. They require at least 3 to 4 hours of overlapping work time for real-time collaborations. Right now, leading companies are big on cultural training. In other words, both sides learn more about their culture, their communication styles, and their cultural norms to be on the same page. Then another challenge that we know is data security and intellectual property protection. We can see when you outsource your most valuable assets, like customer data, proprietary algorithm, trade secrets, they tend to leave your direct control. And now, you are now subject to legal framework of multiple countries. Consider this. In 2020, A major US retailer, which I'm not so certain, but a major US retailer, customer data was compromised through their offshore customer service provider in the Philippines. This breach exposed 5 million credit card members. The company faced a $50 million in legal settlements and immeasurable reputation damage, which is terrible for any company, which we all know. Or take intellectual property, for example. You design a revolutionary product. You send specifications to your manufacturing partner in China. Then 6 months later, a suspiciously similar product appears in another firm, like Alibaba, for example. That is half of your product. Which happens. It is not new, it happens. What would you do? What should be the solution? We can see that smart companies implement what's called defense in depth strategy. Defense in depth strategy. And now we actually have several breakdowns, like regular audits, technical control, and legal safeguards. Another challenge we can think about, which is usually huge, we all know it, which is human cost. Human costs. When you announce outsourcing, for example, you are the best, your best employee starts updating their resume. The people you need to train their replacements are now the ones that are most likely to leave, which is really frustrating for any organization. And with them goes decades of institutional knowledge, which we know it's normal and really frustrating. I've seen companies spend millions outsourcing, only to bring operations back onshore within 2 years because they lost critical knowledge they didn't even know they had, which is really terrible. What do you think the solution would be? What do you think the solution should be? The most ethical and efficient companies use what's called right-shoring. Not offshoring all the time. Not offshoring all the time. But strategically deciding what goes where. We can see several ways they do it. We can see core competencies, commodity work, argumentation, not replacement. When we talk about argumentation, not replacement, it might be a bit confusing, yes. They use offshore teams to expand capacity and not to replace domestic workers, which is a brilliant idea, in our opinion. And what about those affected? What about those affected? We tend to see that responsible companies invest in retraining, internal mobility programs, and transparent communication. For example, when AT&T, that's a communication company, AT&T announced major outsourcing in 2015. 2015, correct. They launched at least $1 billion for employees retraining. And what was the result? It actually resulted in higher retention of key talent and smoother transitions, which was golden for them. Now, where does this leave us? Where does this leave us? You see, outsourcing and offshoring, it's going nowhere. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. Globalization is here to stay. But we need to evolve from cost-cutting exercises. We need to evolve from cost-cutting exercises. You know, the companies that win do 4 things differently. companies that tend to succeed, they do 4 things differently. 1, they calculate true costs, not just labor saving. 2, they invest in relationship, not just contracts. 3, they tend to protect what matters, which is what their data, their IP, and their reputation. Number 4, they tend to balance efficiency with ethics. I actually thank you all for this platform given to us, and myself and my colleagues, Cretan and Jennifer, we thank you all for listening to us. Thank you very much.